Okay, Mr. Chair, I have 5:30.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It's 5:30 and I will call this Committee of Adjustment meeting to order. I will remind the panel of any disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Seeing none noted. Section 3, we have the adoption of the minutes. We have a motion that reads that the minutes from the Committee of Adjustment meeting held April the 20th, 2023 be approved as presented. Presume that everyone has perused those, and I have a mover, Committee Member Chilcott and Committee Member Weisler will second. All in favor? That's carried. This evening, we have 4 applications, and we'll begin with minor variance application A-04/23 Fleet 55139 Maple Grove line. The purpose of this variance is to grant relief from zoning bylaw regulations in section 4.2B, 4.2D, 7.11.2, and 7.11.3 to permit an accessory building to be located in the front yard, to permit an accessory building closer to the street than the main building, so that is to the street, to permit side yard setback for an accessory building of 1 meter, 3.3 feet, whereas 3 meters or 9.8 feet is the minimum in the rural residential zone, and to permit combined accessory building floor area of 102.6 square meters, 1,104 square feet, whereas 95 square meters or 1,023 square feet is the permitted maximum in the RR zone for lands located at 55139 Maple Grove line, southeast side and south of Baldwin line. The effect of this variance will be to permit a new accessory building, a garage, to be located on the east side of the property, which is considered the front yard and would be closer to Maple Grove line than the dwelling. Reduced side yard setback due to the driveway and dwelling configuration and the septic location in the rear yard, as well as a minor increase to permitted maximum accessory building floor area when including the floor area of the existing garden shed. And at this time, we'll entertain the staff presentation that would be report DS-39/23 by Margaret Underhill, Secretary Treasurer, regarding Committee of Adjustment minor variance A-04/23 Fleet 55139 Maple Grove line. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee. So the report before you, the chairman has already read the purpose and the effect of the minor variance. I won't repeat that again. But I would note that the planner and staff do support the minor variance. After a full review of the application, it does meet the 4 tests for minor variance, and it would be in compliance with the minor variance 2, section 4.2, accessory uses, subsection C and D, because we do need to recognize that it's in the front yard and closer to the street than the dwelling, and it would permit the side yard setback of less than 1 meter. The building that is going to be built is for garage for personal residential uses, and the recommendation is before the committee for discussion, and I will be here for questions.
Thank you for that. We will move on to any presentations by the applicant or agent. Do you wish to speak to this?
No, I'm just very pleased with
Okay. Guess we don't need to have him sign in for that. No. Any public submissions?
Mr. Chair, there was 1 public submission received on June the 28th. It was circulated to the committee on July 5 after the 3 p.m. deadline for public comment, and it was received from Richard and Christine Stewart in support of the application.
All right, thank you for that. We'll move on then to any committee questions and discussion. Seeing none, we have the decision of the committee to consider. The motion would read that the Committee of Adjustment Secretary Treasurer's Report DS-39/23 regarding the fleet minor variance be received, and that the Committee of Adjustment considered all written and oral submissions received on this application, the effect of which helped the committee to make an informed decision. And whereas the committee agrees that the proposed variance as presented meets section 45(1) of the Planning Act and is considered minor, Therefore, application A 4/23 submitted by Graham and Lindsay Fleet pursuant to section 45 of the Planning Act for minor variance is granted to allow relief from municipality of Bayham zoning bylaw Z 456/2003. Sections 4.2 accessory uses, subsection C and D, section 7.11 regulations for accessory buildings, subsections 7.11.2 and 7.11.3 to permit a new accessory building in the front yard and closer to the street than the dwelling, and to permit a side yard setback for a proposed building of not less than 1 meter, and to permit combined accessory building floor area of 103 square meters, rounded up slightly to account for any minor deviations to the floor area as a result of construction. Whereas 95 square meters is the permitted maximum in the rural residential zone. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Committee member Emerson will move, committee member Chilcott will second. All in favor? That is carried. Moving on with minor variance application A 5/23, Tom's 26 Chatham Street. The purpose of the variance is to grant relief from zoning bylaw regulation section 10.11C to permit a combined accessory building floor area of 97.01 square meters, and I assume that's a typo. It's more than 96.98 square feet.
Yes, that would be a typo.
Mhm. Whereas 75 square meters or 1,023 square feet is the permitted maximum in the village residential R1 zone for lands located at 26 Chatham Street, east side, south of Cowper Street in Port Burwell. The effect of this variance will be to permit a new accessory building, pool cabana, in addition to an existing accessory building, a garage, with combined floor area, which combined floor area exceeds the permitted maximum. And at this point, we will entertain the staff presentation, which would be report DS 40/23 by Margaret Underhill, Secretary Treasurer, regarding the Committee of Adjustment minor variance A 5/23, Tom's 26 Chatham Street. Margaret.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the report before you, the purpose and effect has been read to the committee. The application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act for minor variance. Planner's memorandum does outline the full analysis. The staff and planner, they do concur that the application does meet the criteria and recommends the minor variances in the recommendation. To accommodate the construction of an accessory building with an accumulative maximum floor area of 97.01 should be meters. Whereas 75 square meters is the actual maximum permitted in the R1 zone. So the recommendation is before you for discussion, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation on this? Okay. Open it up to any committee questions and discussion. Seeing none, we'll move on with the decision of the committee. That the Committee of Adjustment Secretary Treasurer's Report DS 40/23 regarding the Tom's minor variance be received, and that the Committee of Adjustment considered all written and oral submissions received on this application, the effect of which helped the committee to make an informed decision. Whereas the committee agrees that the proposed variance as presented meets section 45(1) of the Planning Act and is considered minor. Therefore, application A 5/23 submitted by Bill and Annette Toms pursuant to section 45 of the Planning Act for a minor variance is granted to allow relief from municipality of Bayham zoning bylaw Z 456/2003, section 10.11C, regulations for accessory buildings, maximum floor area to permit a combined accessory building floor area of 97.2 square meters, rounded up slightly to account for any minor deviations to the floor area as a result of construction. That S keeps throwing me off.
I know.
Yes.
Sorry.
Whereas 75 square meters is the permitted maximum in the R1 zone. You have,
Mr. Chair, my apologies. I just have to back up one step and note that we did receive correspondence from the LPRCA,
yes,
July 5. That was circulated to the committee for information. And they expressed they have no objection to the concept of the application. So sorry, I just had to back up. and stuff.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Having heard the motion, is there a mover and seconder? Committee member Emerson will move and committee member Weiser will second. All in favor? That is carried. Application C, minor variance application A 6/23, Red Soul and Astbury at 7363 Coyle Road. Purpose of the variance is to permit two dwelling units for the purpose of supplementary farm dwelling accommodations in portions of two permanent buildings in accordance to the Bayham Official Plan, section 2.1.10.1. The subject lands are located at 7363 Coyle Road, west side and north side of Jackson Line. The effect of this variance will be to allow the permitted use of supplementary farm dwelling in the form of one dwelling unit and a portion of the existing primary dwelling with a maximum floor area of 106 square meters. That's 1,141 square feet, and maximum capacity of two year-round farm workers and one portion of an existing permanent barn with a floor area maximum of 37.2 square meters, 400 square feet, and a maximum capacity of two year-round farm workers. This point will entertain the staff presentation. That's report DS-43/23, 41/23, excuse me, by Margaret Underhill, Secretary Treasurer, regarding Committee of Adjustment Minor Variance A 0623, Redsel and Asbury, 7363 Coyle Road. Marg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee, the purpose and effect has been read. I would add, at this point, that we did receive comment from LPRCA dated July 5. That was circulated to the committee. LPRCA does have a concern with the addition that was put on the permanent dwelling. I did reach out to Long Point to ask how they wish to address that, but I did not get a response prior to the meeting, so I will be following up with that.
Right.
But that will come into play as far as how it's related to the building permit. So not so much here. They're not objecting to the addition of the apartment unit in the North Barn. So moving on, the planner's memorandum outlines a full analysis of the four tests of the variance. Staff and planner do agree that the application will meet the criteria with these variances, and it would allow the secondary, or I should say the supplementary dwelling in the primary dwelling and a secondary supplementary farm dwelling in the North Barn. It was expressed in the application. Mr. Redsell is applying for offshore farm help. He is going through a government program to acquire a person to come in and assist with his farming operation. So the recommendation is before you for discussion, and I'm here for questions.
Well, thank you for that, Mark. Any questions for staff? So just to clarify then, Mark, the barn is being set up as secondary. So
It's
the apartment
through
is
Mr.
second,
Chair, it's a second supplementary farm. dwelling.
second supplementary.
Yes.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Can you define the permitted occupancy in a supplementary farm dwelling? What's the period of time?
Normally, a supplementary farm dwelling would be a seasonal from April till November.
Mhm.
Mr. Redsell is asking for year-round occupancy
Okay, how do we
So it's
accommodate
different.
that?
with through the minor variance.
All right,
Through the recommendation, it does say for capacity of year-round farm workers.
I know.
So it
That's,
would be in the variance.
that's the point. Supplementary farm dwellings usually have a April through till November time limit.
Correct.
But this is why the variance is there to ask for year round.
It's to ask for year-round and ask for a second supplementary farm dwelling and to recognize the addition on the primary dwelling as a supplementary farm dwelling. So he actually has two.
So why wouldn't the application then come through from the Planning Act for a secondary farm dwelling rather than supplementary?
Secondary farm dwellings are not for workers. Secondary dwelling units are not for supplementary farm dwelling.
I would disagree.
Well, that's in the regulations.
Okay, but on parcels where there's a second house, usually it's farmhouse for help year round.
Yes,
Yes.
in an existing. If
In an
there's
existing,
Existing, house, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Red Cell put an addition onto his primary dwelling
Yes.
for the purpose of housing a farm worker.
All right.
Okay.
Why-
And then the second one is, again, to house a farm worker, both year round. So it's not a secondary dwelling unit. It's two supplementary farm dwellings for seasonal farm help. In this case, he's asking for year round
Okay.
occupancy.
You can understand where there'd be some confusion interpreted by the public out there. Committee member Froze.
Thank you very much. So these, both of these, proposed buildings are on the same farm.
That is correct. In addition to all of that, is that we are going to be entering into a development agreement that lays out the regulations surrounding the use of these two supplementary farm dwellings. And in that, it will state that it's year-round occupancy.
Okay.
So one more question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Committee member Emerson.
Is the barn total residence or a portion of the barn?
No.
I thought there was an issue with safety and building fire permits and stuff, that there was two uses for residents. That not true?
Through the chair, this proposal here, they're only looking about 400 square feet. It's just a small apartment unit in the barn. So they will have to meet all Ontario Building Code regulations and requirements in order to renovate this apartment for occupancy. Whatever that he has to do, he's gonna have to update it, upgrade it, whatever, to renovate it for occupancy.
So the whole barn has to follow into those regulations.
I-
Just the apartment.
I can't speak to the whole barn. I can only speak to the apartment where it's actually gonna be human occupancy. Will have to meet the OBC for all regulations for occupancy. Beyond that, I can't answer too many questions. That would be a building inspector inquiry.
Any additional questions? Committee member Chilcott.
Thank you. So basically, each dwelling will house one family or
Two people.
two people, two different families. So it is a
People not.
Two people.
doesn't matter what. I'm just trying to figure out, because a lot of the supplementary have 6 or 7 people residing in them seasonally. These will be living year round.
Mhm.
I just wondered whether it was family per dwelling or if it was multiple.
Through the chair.
Workers.
What Mr. Red Cell has is right now he has a couple living in the supplementary dwelling attached to his house. That's all he's looking for. In the unit that's going in the barn, he has applied through a government program to acquire a person from offshore. And at this point, it's a single male who's coming to work for him on the farm. But we put a maximum occupancy. If he happens to meet someone, you could have a couple living there, but we're maxing it at 2 people.
That's what I was trying
Yes.
to figure out. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Public submissions? I don't believe there was any public submissions that I recall seeing. We didn't, I asked, no, we didn't do that. I noticed that the applicant wasn't present, so I skipped by that. We need to ask for any public submissions.
I would just note here that there are none.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no additional questions, we'll move on with the question. That the Committee of Adjustment Secretary Treasurer's Report DS 41-23 regarding the red salt minor variance be received, and that the Committee of Adjustment considered all written and oral submissions received on this application, the effect of which helped the committee to make an informed decision. Whereas the committee agrees that the proposed variance as presented meets section 45(1) of the Planning Act and is considered minor. Therefore, application A-06-23 submitted by Matthew Redsel and Dorothy Asbury pursuant to section 45 of the Planning Act for a minor variance is granted to allow relief from municipality of Bayham zoning bylaw number Z 456 2003, section 5.2 permitted uses to permit one supplementary farm dwelling unit in a portion of an existing primary dwelling with a maximum floor area of 106 square meters and a maximum capacity of 2 year-round farm workers, and a second supplementary farm dwelling unit in a portion of an existing permanent barn, north barn, with floor area of maximum 38 square meters and a maximum capacity of 2 year-round farm workers. Condition, development agreement for the supplementary farm dwellings be executed within 6 months of the minor variance approval. Mover and seconder. Committee member Weisler and committee member Chilcott will second. I have one more additional question. If these are going to be year-round occupancy, as opposed to what we consider traditional supplementary farm, what's to distinguish them from permanent residents? Point being, these will be taxed as outbuildings, housing year-round residents. What's the difference between that and a residential area?
These are deemed as.
Are they? Oh, I didn't see you sneak in there, Matt. It's,
Come up to the podium.
come up to the podium, sign in, please. See, I understand that, Matt, but what I'm getting at is, what's the difference if they were from here from April through to November? That's what typically a supplementary farm dwelling is.
If you have if you have a typical farm, yes, but I don't have a typical farm. We produce
Understood.
sunflower oil and flour year round. Our customers go around year round. We do the pressing and milling once a month usually. I have been very desperate to find somebody to help me. I'm now 75 and still working, as you can probably tell. And it's nice to have somebody who came in and is well qualified to take over the oil pressing. I have one farm worker already. We farm with horses, so it makes it interesting. Hopefully it'll save fuel down the road for all of us. It's a female. She drives all the horses, drives the tractors, combines, is the partial mechanic, so she's extremely valuable to us. The fellow coming from Ghana is well qualified to manage a farm, but he wants to do the oil pressing. I really need somebody who can do that. I'm no longer able to keep it up, so our income from that has fallen because I can't do the work all the time. It takes somebody with a lot more brains than I have at present. I'm feeling kind of old now. And he seems very much interested in the way we farm. It's a regenerative type farming. We spend a lot of money and time on upgrading the soils. And that is perhaps the most important thing. We may not produce much of a profit, but the soils we have produced are excellent. In fact, I've pioneered a lot of different techniques for growing things in our climate. I plant rye and clover, and I crimp that in the spring. And if you look out in our field right now, the sunflowers are coming through quite nicely. It's probably the first time I've had the best crop I've had. And then we'll go out and do the seeds, and then we'll start the pressing and all that. So I absolutely have to have somebody year round. And I think you'll find a lot of other farms are going the same way too. We're going to have to work year round, especially if we're starting to have a lot more crops over the winter time, which I think is really important if you're into any kind of organic stuff. Because this year has been terrible for weeds. I don't know how you found it yet, but I found it very difficult. But with the rye, it's nice and tall and it squashes up the weeds, and we just run it down and it dies, and then my sunflowers come up. So I'm pretty proud of that. It's been about 4 or 5 years from me trying that, and that's where we're at. So it's just a problem of age now. I'm getting too old to do all the work, and it's nice to see other people want to come in and work, and especially there's so few people today who can do horses. And Susie has been excellent. She trains them, she drives them. We did all our haying with horses, and it's certainly something we're going to have to consider if we have a fossil fuel problem. I think that's pretty apparent. And I'll pass, any other questions? I hope I can answer.
Well, that, yeah, I thank you for the explanation, Matt, and I read that in the application and I
Oh.
appreciate it.
Okay.
But it still doesn't answer the question.
What's the question?
The question is, supplementary farm dwellings by tradition are to be occupied through a certain period of time. April through till the end of November. Thereby, they're still classified as a farm outbuilding and taxed accordingly. If they're a year-round residence, what's the difference between that and an off-farm residence?
I don't have the answer for that, but I know the program I'm applied for, the LMIA, says we can have full-time workers,
Yeah.
which I really need. What else can I say? I don't know what the law says. I've been working with the building inspector. I've had 3 different building inspectors and I had Scott to come in today. Everybody seems quite happy with the situation. The sewage system, it actually is existing and works fine. I don't know what to say to that, except we probably just pay the taxes like everybody else, whatever it is.
Mr. Chair, I would say that in both circumstances for both units, building permits are issued.
Yeah.
Building permits will be circulated to MPAC. It's up to MPAC to assess the property accordingly. It will be noted on the permit for the apartment in the barn that it's going to be a full-time
Right.
occupancy. So as far as the assessed value, we will leave that to MPAC to determine how they would look at that property and how they would assign a value to that.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But we already have examples of supplementary farm dwellings that are year-round occupancy outside of the permitted use. That's what I'm getting at. This is where this is getting a little confusing for the public out there.
Yes. This one, he is asking specifically for year-round use.
Yes,
We have supplementary farm dwellings that are out there being illegally used
that's
year-round,
what I'm getting at.
which is a bylaw matter.
Mhm.
I am trying to do it properly.
I appreciate that, Matt. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay, just throwing it out there. All right, we have a motion due. Yes, Committee Member Weiser.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Just one clarification question, because you had mentioned that Long Point had some concerns about the home dwelling.
No,
No, through the chair, Long Point has expressed that there would be a permit required for the addition that was put on the primary dwelling, which Mr. Redsell already had a building permit issued in 2019. It's kind of a backtracking, and that's where I said I reached out to Long Point to find out how they want to deal with that. I don't have an answer yet. They didn't get back to me prior to the meeting. But that will be a building permit question that we will work out between Long Point and our building inspector moving forward.
And that won't affect the North Farm addition. Okay, no, thank you.
No, it will not.
I
The
would,
North Barn falls outside of the regulated area.
that's what it's about. And that's what I was going to presume, that the residence falls within the regulated, the barn does not. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, now we have a motion that's duly moved and seconded. What is your pleasure? All in favor? Congratulations, it's carried. Item D, minor variance application A 0723 Holcomb at 53665 and 53693 Pressy Road. The purpose of the variance is to grant relief from zoning bylaw regulations in section 4.2C and 4.2D to permit an accessory building to be located in the front yard and closer to the street than the main building is to the street. For lands located at 53665 and 53693 Pressy Road, south side, east of Springer Hill Road. The effect of the variance will be to permit a new accessory building garage to be located on the east side of the property in the front yard and closer to Pressy Road than the dwelling, in the area of a former dwelling and accessory building on the subject lands. At this point, we'll entertain the staff presentation. That's DS-42/23, Margaret Underhill, Secretary Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, Minor Variance A 0723 Holcomb, 53665 and 53693 Pressy Road. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose and effect have been read aloud. Letting you know that I did receive this afternoon, Catfish Creek Conservation Authority provided a response to my inquiry, because that area of ban does fall within their jurisdiction. But it does not fall within their regulated area, so they do not have a concern. But I did want to note, I did get that this afternoon. The committee needs to reference the planner's memorandum that outlined the full analysis of the 4 tests, the variances are required for compliance to the zoning bylaw. Staff and planner concur that the application meets the criteria. We do recommend the minor variances to provide relief from zoning bylaw sections 4.2C and D, to permit a new accessory building in the front yard and closer to the street than the dwelling. So the recommendation is before the committee for discussion, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you for that. Are the applicants present? Do they wish to make a presentation? Okay. Any public submissions?
I will note that there were none, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee questions and discussion. Okay, then I'll call the question. The Committee of Adjustment Secretary Treasurer's Report DS 4223 regarding the Holcomb minor variance be received, and that the Committee of Adjustment considered all written and oral submissions received on this application, the effect of which helped the committee to make an informed decision. And whereas the committee agrees that the proposed variance as presented meets section 45(1) of the Planning Act and is considered minor. Therefore, application A 0723 submitted by Anthony and Deborah Holcomb pursuant to section 45 of the Planning Act for a minor variance is granted to allow relief from municipality of Banff zoning bylaw number Z 456/2003. Sections 4.2C and 4.2D to permit a new accessory building in the front yard and closer to the street than the dwelling in the A1 zone. Have a mover and seconder, please. Committee member Chilcott will move. Committee member Weiser will second. All in favor? That is carried. The adjournment motion at the Committee of Adjustment meeting for consideration of minor variance applications A 0423, A 0523, A 0623, and A 723 be adjourned at 6:03 PM. And that in accordance with the regulations of the Planning Act, notices of decision be circulated by the Secretary Treasurer accordingly. Mover and seconder? Committee member Froze will move. And I saw committee member Chilcott seconding. All in favor? That is carried. We are adjourned.